For thousands of years, human beings believed they saw the world exactly as it was. A tree was simply a tree. A river was simply a river. Reality seemed obvious, until neuroscience discovered something astonishing. Your brain never experiences reality first, it predicts it. Every second, billions of pieces of information rush toward your senses. The color of the sky, the sound of distant traffic, the feeling of your clothes against your skin, the expressions on a stranger's face. If your brain tried to process every detail consciously, it would be overwhelmed within moments. So instead, it makes a prediction. Based on everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever believed, and everything you've ever experienced, it constructs a version of reality before you're even aware of it. In other words, we spend much of our lives not seeing the world as it truly is, but seeing the world our minds expect to find. Perhaps that explains something curious. Why children can spend an hour watching an ant carry a leaf, while adults walk past an entire forest without noticing a single tree. Their eyes are almost identical, their brains are not. One mind is discovering, the other is recognizing. One is filled with questions, the other is filled with answers. More than 50 years ago, a Japanese Zen master named Shunryu Suzuki suggested that this quiet transformation lies at the heart of human suffering. Not because knowledge is dangerous, but because certainty is. In his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he introduced an idea so simple that it almost sounds childish. To understand life more deeply, you must first learn how to see it again, not as an expert, but as a beginner. Welcome to Book Bite. Today, we're exploring one of the most influential books ever written on Zen philosophy. Not to escape the modern world, but to understand the invisible habits of the mind that shape it every single day. Because the greatest limitation is not that we know too little, it may be that we have stopped noticing how much there is still left to see.
Beginner's Mind. Long before scientists could study the human brain, Zen masters had already begun studying something else: attention. They noticed that two people could stand in the exact same place, look at the exact same landscape, and experience two completely different worlds. One person would see nothing unusual, the other would leave feeling transformed. What changed? Not the mountain, not the sky, not the wind, only the mind that was observing them. Shunryu Suzuki believed that this difference begins the moment we become convinced that we already understand something. The first time you watch the ocean, it feels endless. The 100th time, your mind quietly whispers, "It's just the ocean." The object hasn't become ordinary, your attention has. Modern neuroscience now offers an extraordinary explanation. The brain is constantly searching for efficiency. Instead of examining every experience from the beginning, it creates mental shortcuts. Scientists call these schemas. They're internal models built from everything we've learned throughout life. They help us recognize faces in an instant, understand language without translating every word, and navigate familiar places without getting lost. Without these mental models, every ordinary task would require enormous effort. They are essential for survival, but they come with a hidden cost. The stronger our assumptions become, the less attention we give to what is actually in front of us. We stop observing, we start identifying, we stop discovering, we start labeling. To Zen, this is where wisdom quietly begins to disappear, because the moment we believe, "I already know," curiosity leaves the room. And without curiosity, learning becomes almost impossible. That is why Suzuki never encouraged people to become less intelligent. He encouraged them to become less certain. Because every meaningful discovery in human history began with someone willing to admit, "Perhaps there is something here I have never truly seen before."
There is another reason Shunryu Suzuki valued the beginner's mind. It wasn't because beginners know more. It was because they notice more. In 1999, psychologists at Harvard conducted a simple experiment. They asked participants to perform an ordinary task. Half of them approached it believing they already understood what they were doing. The other half were encouraged to remain curious and open to unexpected details. The difference was remarkable. The curious group consistently noticed patterns, mistakes, and possibilities that everyone else overlooked. Their intelligence hadn't suddenly increased, their attention had. Science continues to reveal the same pattern. Curiosity activates the brain's reward system. When we become genuinely interested in something, the brain releases dopamine. Most people think of dopamine as the chemical of pleasure, but neuroscientists describe it differently. It's the chemical of exploration. It motivates the brain to search, to investigate, and to keep learning. In other words, curiosity doesn't simply make learning more enjoyable. It physically prepares the brain to remember more of what it discovers. Perhaps this explains why children learn languages so effortlessly. They aren't worried about sounding intelligent. They aren't afraid of asking simple questions. They aren't protecting an image of being the expert. They simply explore. Adults often reverse that process. We become cautious. We hesitate to ask questions. We avoid admitting we don't understand, not because we lack curiosity, but because we fear looking uninformed. Shunryu Suzuki saw this long before modern psychology. He understood that the greatest obstacle to learning is rarely a lack of knowledge. It is the desire to appear knowledgeable. Because the moment protecting your reputation becomes more important than discovering the truth, growth quietly comes to an end. And once the mind becomes free from the need to always be right, it becomes ready for something even more difficult: learning how to let go of the person you believe yourself to be. No ego. If there is one idea that separates Zen from almost every other philosophy, it is this: the greatest obstacle standing between you and reality is not the world. It is the image you have created of yourself. From the moment we are children, we begin collecting identities: good student, talented athlete, successful professional, creative person, quiet person, confident person, failure, winner, loser. Over time, these descriptions stop feeling like labels. They begin feeling like who we are. Shunryu Suzuki believed this is where suffering quietly begins, because once the mind becomes attached to an identity, it starts defending it. If someone challenges your opinion, it feels like they are challenging you. If you make a mistake, it feels like your entire identity has become a mistake. Yet modern neuroscience paints a very different picture. There is no single place inside the brain where a permanent self exists.
Instead, the sense of identity is constructed through many different brain networks, constantly updating with memories, experiences, emotions, and expectations. The person you believe yourself to be is not a fixed object. It is an ongoing process. Psychologists call this the narrative self. Your brain is continuously telling a story about who you are. The remarkable part is that the story often feels so convincing we mistake it for reality. Zen asks a simple but unsettling question. What happens if the story is incomplete? What happens if the labels you've carried for years are only habits of thought rather than permanent truths? Perhaps that is why Suzuki encouraged students to approach themselves with the same curiosity they would bring to a mountain or a river, not trying to defend an identity, not trying to become someone special, simply observing without immediately deciding what everything means. Because the moment the ego becomes quieter, something else becomes possible. For the first time, you stop trying to protect who you think you are and begin discovering who you might become.
The strange thing about the ego is that it rarely announces itself. Most people imagine ego as arrogance, someone who constantly believes they're better than everyone else. But Zen sees it differently. Sometimes ego sounds surprisingly humble. It says, "I'm just not talented enough. I'll never be as good as them. This is simply who I am." Both arrogance and self-doubt have something in common. They are both forms of attachment to an identity. One believes, "I'm greater than reality." The other believes, "I'm smaller than reality." Either way, the mind stops observing what is actually true. Modern psychology calls this cognitive fusion. It happens when people become so attached to their thoughts that they stop recognizing them as thoughts. Instead, they experience them as unquestionable facts. A single failure becomes, "I am a failure." One rejection becomes, "Nobody will ever accept me." One success becomes, "I must never fail again." The mind quietly transforms temporary experiences into permanent identities. Zen gently interrupts this illusion. It reminds us that thoughts, like clouds, appear, change, and disappear. They were never meant to become the sky itself. Brain imaging studies offer another fascinating insight. During mindfulness meditation, activity in the brain's default mode network often becomes quieter. This network is deeply involved in self-referential thinking, the endless internal conversation about me, my future, my mistakes, my reputation. When that activity decreases, many people report something unexpected. They don't lose themselves, they simply feel less trapped inside the story they constantly tell themselves. Perhaps that is what Shunryu Suzuki wanted his students to discover. Freedom does not come from creating a better identity. It comes from realizing you are far more than any identity your mind could ever invent. And once the need to constantly defend yourself begins to fade, something remarkable becomes possible. You stop practicing to become someone important and begin practicing simply because the practice itself is enough. Practice without chasing results. If there is one habit that defines modern life, it is measuring everything. We count our followers, our grades, our income, our productivity, our achievements. Almost every action is judged by one question: what will I get in return? Shunryu Suzuki believed this simple question quietly changes the way we experience life. because the moment every action becomes a means to an end, the present moment loses its value. Meditation becomes a tool to reduce stress. Exercise becomes a tool to improve appearance. Reading becomes a tool to gain status. Even kindness can become a strategy for receiving kindness in return. Slowly, life turns into an endless chain of transactions. Zen offers a completely different perspective. Practice, simply because practicing transforms the person who is doing it, not because it guarantees a particular reward. This idea sounds almost irrational in a world obsessed with outcomes. Yet modern psychology has arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion. Researchers studying long-term motivation discovered that people driven primarily by external rewards, money, recognition, or praise, often lose interest once those rewards disappear. But people motivated by the activity itself, learning, creating, exploring, improving, remain consistent for far longer. Psychologists call this intrinsic motivation. It is one of the strongest predictors of mastery in nearly every field. Musicians who love practicing continue when nobody is listening. Scientists driven by curiosity keep searching even after repeated failures. Artists continue creating long before anyone recognizes their work. Their motivation is no longer borrowed from the outside world. It comes from within. Perhaps that is what Suzuki wanted his students to understand. The purpose of sitting quietly in meditation was never to become someone extraordinary. The purpose was simply to sit completely. Because the deepest transformations in life often happen not while chasing the destination, but while becoming fully present in the journey itself.
There is another reason Zen places so much importance on practice itself, because the human brain learns differently than we often imagine. Most people believe improvement happens in dramatic moments: the breakthrough, the promotion, the championship, the perfect performance. But neuroscience tells a quieter story. Every time you repeat a skill, whether it's playing an instrument, learning a language, or sitting in silent meditation, your brain is physically changing. Connections between neurons become stronger. Signals travel more efficiently. Movements require less conscious effort. Scientists call this experience-dependent neuroplasticity. The remarkable part is that the brain doesn't reward perfection, it rewards repetition. This is why someone who practices consistently for 20 minutes every day often improves more than someone who practices for 5 hours once a week. Progress is rarely explosive. It is cumulative, almost invisible while it is happening, yet undeniable when enough time has passed. Shunryu Suzuki understood this long before neuroscience could observe it. He often reminded his students that there was no such thing as a perfect meditation. Some days the mind would feel peaceful. Other days it would wander endlessly. Both days were equally valuable because the purpose was never to create a perfect experience. The purpose was to return again and again and again. This changes the meaning of discipline entirely. Discipline is no longer forcing yourself toward an impossible standard. It becomes the quiet decision to continue showing up, regardless of how you feel. Perhaps this is why the strongest oak tree, the greatest musician, the wisest teacher, and the calmest mind all grow in remarkably similar ways, not through one extraordinary moment, but through thousands of ordinary ones. And once the obsession with results begins to fade, another transformation quietly begins. For the first time, you stop asking, "When will I finally arrive?" and begin noticing that life has always been happening right here.
Being present. For most of human history, survival depended on thinking about tomorrow, where the next meal would come from, where danger might appear, how to prepare for winter. The human brain evolved to constantly scan the future. It also learned another habit, replaying the past, remembering mistakes, searching for lessons, avoiding pain. Both abilities helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world, the same brain often becomes trapped between two places that don't exist, a future that hasn't happened, and a past that can no longer be changed. Very little attention remains for the only place where life is actually unfolding, the present moment. Shunryu Suzuki believed this constant movement of the mind was one of the greatest sources of unnecessary suffering. Not because thinking is wrong, but because most of us are no longer choosing our thoughts. Our thoughts are choosing us. Modern neuroscience reveals something remarkable. When the mind is not focused on a specific task, a collection of brain regions known as the default mode network becomes highly active. This network is responsible for much of our inner dialogue, replaying conversations, imagining future scenarios, judging ourselves, comparing ourselves with others. It is incredibly useful, but when it becomes overactive, research has linked it to increased anxiety, rumination, and emotional exhaustion. This is one reason mindfulness meditation has attracted so much scientific attention. Brain imaging studies consistently show that experienced meditators often display reduced activity in this network, not because they have stopped thinking, but because they have become less controlled by every thought that appears. Perhaps that is what Zen has always been pointing toward. The goal is not an empty mind. The goal is a free mind, a mind capable of noticing a thought without immediately following it. Because the greatest freedom is not controlling the world around you. It is discovering that you don't have to believe every story your own mind decides to tell. There is another illusion that Zen asks us to question. The belief that life is waiting somewhere ahead, after the next promotion, after graduation, after buying the house, after becoming successful, after finally fixing everything that feels incomplete. The destination keeps changing, but the promise remains the same. Once I arrive there, then I'll begin living. Shunryu Suzuki saw this as one of the mind's most subtle habits. The present moment quietly becomes a bridge, never a place to stand. Yet every meaningful experience has always existed in only one place. A conversation, a sunrise, the sound of rain against a window, the laughter of a child, the feeling of taking a deep breath. They can only happen now, never yesterday, never tomorrow. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy. It's the tendency to believe that reaching a future goal will produce lasting happiness. For a short time, it often does, but the brain quickly adapts. What once felt extraordinary soon becomes normal. Scientists refer to this as hedonic adaptation. The new job becomes routine. The new phone becomes ordinary.
the dream house simply becomes home. The mind immediately begins searching for the next destination. Zen doesn't suggest abandoning ambition. It asks a deeper question. What if the quality of your attention matters more than the location of your success? Because someone with a restless mind can stand on the most beautiful mountain in the world and still be thinking about tomorrow, while someone with a quiet mind can find wonder in an ordinary cup of tea. Perhaps that is why Suzuki never described enlightenment as reaching another place. He described it as seeing this moment without constantly asking it to become another one. And when the mind finally stops running toward the future, it discovers something unexpected. There was never anything ordinary about the present. It only appeared ordinary because we had forgotten how to truly see it. That realization leads naturally to one of the deepest ideas in all of Zen, the meaning of emptiness.
Emptiness. Of all the ideas in Zen, none has been misunderstood more than this one. The word itself sounds unsettling. Emptiness. It suggests absence, loneliness, nothingness. But Shunryu Suzuki meant something entirely different. To Zen, emptiness is not the absence of life. It is the absence of unnecessary attachment. Consider a simple glass. Its value does not come from the glass itself. It comes from the empty space inside it. Without that space, it could hold nothing. The same is true of a room. Walls alone are not useful. It is the empty space between them that makes the room livable. Zen suggests that the human mind works in much the same way. When it becomes completely filled with opinions, assumptions, judgments, fears, and constant mental noise, there is very little space left for something new to enter. Modern cognitive science offers a fascinating parallel. Research has shown that experts in many fields often become trapped by what psychologists call functional fixedness. Once the brain learns one successful way of solving a problem, it becomes increasingly difficult to imagine another. The mind becomes efficient but less flexible. This is why children sometimes solve creative problems that adults struggle with. Their minds are less crowded with assumptions about how things are supposed to work. Shunryu Suzuki wasn't asking people to erase their knowledge. He was asking them not to become imprisoned by it. Because wisdom is not collecting more and more ideas. Sometimes wisdom is creating enough space for a completely different idea to appear. Perhaps that is why silence has always played such an important role in Zen, not because silence is empty, but because silence allows us to hear what constant noise has been hiding all along. And when the mind finally becomes spacious enough, it begins to understand something extraordinary. The greatest discoveries in life rarely arrive by force. They arrive when there is finally enough room to receive them.
There is one final lesson hidden inside emptiness, and it has nothing to do with becoming detached from life. It has everything to do with becoming available to it. Imagine trying to pour fresh water into a cup that is already full. No matter how pure the water is, it has nowhere to go. The problem is not the water. The problem is that there is no space left to receive it. Shunryu Suzuki believed the human mind often lives in exactly this condition. Before a conversation even begins, we already know what the other person is going to say. Before opening a book, we believe we already understand its message. Before facing a new experience, our opinions arrive first, our attention arrives second. Modern neuroscience supports this idea in an unexpected way. The brain is designed to minimize surprise. Every prediction it makes saves energy. But researchers have discovered something fascinating. Real learning happens when those predictions are proven wrong. Scientists call these moments prediction errors. They are not mistakes, they are opportunities. When reality contradicts what the brain expected, the brain is forced to update its internal model of the world. This is how genuine learning occurs, not by collecting information that confirms what we already believe, but by remaining open enough to let reality change us. Perhaps this is why Zen places such extraordinary value on silence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is the absence of interruption. It is the moment when the mind stops rushing to provide answers and begins listening again. Because only an open mind can be surprised, only an open mind can discover, and only an open mind can continue growing throughout an entire lifetime. That may be the deepest meaning of emptiness, not becoming less, but making enough room to become more. And when we step back and look at every idea we've explored, from the beginner's mind to the ego, to practice, to presence, and finally to emptiness, we begin to realize they were never separate teachings. They were all pointing toward the same quiet truth. And that is where our journey comes together.
Connecting everything. At first glance, these teachings seem unrelated. One speaks about curiosity, another questions the ego, another asks us to practice without chasing rewards, another teaches presence, another speaks of emptiness. They appear to be 5 different ideas, but Shunryu Suzuki was never describing 5 different paths. He was describing the same mind, seen from 5 different directions. The beginner's mind teaches us to remain open, because certainty quietly closes the door to discovery. Letting go of the ego teaches us that we are more than the stories we constantly tell ourselves. Practice without attachment reminds us that growth happens through consistency, not obsession with outcomes. Being present teaches us that life is experienced only in this moment, never inside memories and never inside imagination. And emptiness reminds us that wisdom is not measured by how much we can hold, but by how much space we leave for something new. What makes these ideas remarkable is that modern science keeps arriving at similar conclusions. Neuroscience shows that the brain changes through curiosity, attention, and repeated practice. Psychology reveals that many of our greatest struggles come not from reality itself, but from the stories we create about reality. Behavioral science demonstrates that flexibility, rather than rigid certainty, is one of the strongest predictors of lifelong learning. Centuries separate Zen from modern laboratories, yet they continue pointing toward the same conclusion. Perhaps the greatest limitation has never been the world around us. Perhaps it has always been the habits of the mind through which we observe it. And once that realization begins to settle, one final question remains. Not about Zen, not about Japan, but about the way each of us chooses to live. Before we end this journey, there is one last reflection worth leaving with. Final reflection. Centuries have passed since Shunryu Suzuki first shared these teachings. The world has changed beyond anything he could have imagined. We carry more knowledge in our pockets than entire civilizations once possessed. We communicate across continents in seconds. Our lives move faster than ever before. And yet, one question remains surprisingly unchanged. Why do so many people still feel restless even after achieving everything they once believed they wanted? Perhaps because information and wisdom have never been the same thing. Information fills the mind. Wisdom changes the way the mind sees. That is the quiet invitation hidden inside Zen Mind, beginner's mind. Not to become someone else, not to escape the modern world, but to meet it with fresh eyes. To remain curious even when certainty feels more comfortable. To continue learning even after success. To let go of identities that no longer help us grow. To practice, not for applause, but because the practice itself is shaping who we become. To recognize that life has never been waiting somewhere in the future. It has always been unfolding, one ordinary moment at a time. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that wisdom is not the destination at the end of the journey. It is the way we choose to walk the journey itself. So before this story comes to an end, pause for just a moment. Look around the room you're sitting in. Notice something that you've never truly noticed before. Listen to a sound you've been ignoring this entire time. Take one slow breath, not because someone told you to, but because for the first time today, you were fully aware of taking it. Nothing about the world has changed. Only your attention has. And sometimes that is enough to change everything. Thank you for joining us on Book Bite. Until our next journey, stay curious, keep your mind open, and never lose the courage to see the world like a beginner.